Welcome to Food Friends, a podcast inspiring home cooks to try new dishes in the kitchen by sharing trusted recipes, tips, and friendship. Hi, I'm Sonya.
And I'm Kari. We met in Los Angeles over 15 years ago as personal chefs and haven't stopped talking about food since. We're so glad you're here.
Hi, Kari.
Hi, Sonya. Sonya, what was your best bite this week?
Kari, my best bite this week was extremely inspired by you.
Aw.
I think, well, it's true. And it's every time I make this, I cannot not think about you. And I think we've only even mentioned this recipe like once, and I think it was years ago. So last night I made ground beef tacos. I always try to replicate the flavor of your tacos. So even though I don't know the method, that's my holy grail. I'm like, make tacos like Kari.
Oh my gosh.
Figure it out. And because the first time I had your tacos was when we were cooking at that retreat in Ojai. You had pre-made the sauce for them. And then you bought fresh ground beef. And then you made these tacos. And did we make hard shell tacos?
We made hard shell tacos, but we also made flour tortilla tacos. And I think that's kind of, it's both of those things. I usually like one of each when I make these. So I like to do them both.
Well, I'm going to check to see how you make it, but I'll tell you what I did last night. So I had a pound of ground beef. I got fresh from the butcher counter, which I really like, instead of one of those plastic container sort of ones because it's a little looser. I sauteed some onions. I added the ground beef to that. I got the ground beef and the onions all caramely and browned. To that, I added a good amount of tomato paste, canned chipotle chili pepper. Not too much that it overpowered. I didn't want it to like taste like smoke. That flavor can be really strong, but it's all I had, and I had it in the freezer, and I had it the way I saved my tomato paste, because I need to make something quick. So anyway, I took some frozen chili paste. I took some frozen tomato paste. I put that in. Then I added a bunch of spices. I added chili powder, paprika, cumin, coriander, and granulated garlic. So garlic powder. And I got everything all cooked. And then I also added a little bit of water, which I know okay, thank you. I wasn't sure. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is what Kari did or something similar. And because I didn't have stock on hand. Anyway, it makes it all kind of saucy instead of dry.
Simmer it a little bit.
Simmer it. Yeah. It reduces. It's not soupy at all. It just becomes glazed and saucy.
Yes.
And then for my tacos, because again, this was all on the fly, I had some frozen corn tortillas in my freezer. I didn't have hard shell tacos or even flour tortillas. And I've been really into just heating them up over the flame of my gas stove now that I have a gas stove again. So I just stick it straight on the burner and I get it nice and charred.
It gets like a little char spots, right? Wow.
Exactly. It gets char spots. And I went directly from the freezer to the stovetop. It didn't matter. It worked perfectly. It takes like about a minute on each side, 2 max. And then I wrap them in a clean kitchen towel so they kind of steam and get softened. And then you top your taco with the things you like.
I mean, first of all, I wish I was at your house for dinner. That sounds incredible. And you're right on the button. I definitely grew up with ground beef tacos. We had them maybe once a week in my house. My mom would always use the packet, like the spice packet from the grocery store. And there weren't any additional onions or garlic or anything like that. And that was such a comforting flavor for me. And at some point when I was a personal chef, I think the New York Times released a recipe and they called them middle school tacos. And I definitely had them as middle school tacos. That was something at my middle school. They were delicious. And whenever they were on the hot lunch, that's what I would eat. I think as I've gotten older and more aware of flavor packets and things like that, there's always things in those flavor packets that I don't want. And so I sort of set out to figure out how to make them a little bit more homemade. So when I saute my ground beef, I do always add an onion. And I also really like a lean ground beef in this, because if you're using a fattier ground beef, then you have to drain it. Otherwise, there's just too much fat.
I did have to drain it, which I also
fine.
You could put a paper towel into the pan too and it will soak up a bunch. But yeah,
but
go
this
ahead.
is a place I like a lean ground beef. And also if you don't eat beef, turkey or chicken, those work totally fine too. Or I sometimes use buffalo or bison if you find you have those alternative meats, because really what you're looking for is the good flavor. I discovered that Guajillo is the chili that's the closest to this nostalgic, very Americanized ground beef taco flavor. And so I did develop a chili sauce using Guajillo chilies and a few other spices, all of which you described: the chili powder, garlic powder. I think a little bit of cumin is in there. And so I think even just an onion, ground beef, some tomato paste, caramelize it a little bit, add a few spices. I think you can really get there. It's meant to be very mild. I don't know that I would ever add the chipotle chili paste to mine because I really like it to be super mild.
Mine wasn't very spicy. I would say I added like a teaspoon,
Okay.
and I added it because it adds just a little bit more of a chili pepper flavor than the dried
Yes.
spice, because I didn't rehydrate a dried guajillo
Right.
chili, which is what you're talking about. So if I had taken the time to make a chili sauce, which is essentially taking dried chilies, rehydrating them in water, and then
Yes.
blend them up with garlic and whatever spices you want, that's how you'd make a chili sauce or chili paste. I didn't have that time. I didn't have those ingredients. So this was just like my cheat. But I agree with you. You have to be sparing, because if you add too much of that canned pepper, it both overpowers it and it makes it incredibly spicy.
Well, and the other thing too, you mentioned is when you tasted these, we were on a retreat. So it does make sense that I took the time to make this like special chili paste for this retreat. But this is not something I do in my regular life. Or if I do it, I make a big batch and then I stick it in my freezer and I pull them out when I'm ready. I have not done that for a couple of years. So if you want to experiment with ground beef tacos like this and you don't want to use the spice packet, the one tip that I think is important is that too many dry spices make it cakey. You really want to keep it mild. Chili powder is a good one. Cumin is a good one. I like a little coriander, a little bit of garlic. Tomato paste adds that sweetness without adding any sugar. You mentioned broth. I've never put broth in mine. I always add a little bit of water. And that was really something my mom used to do too, because she would sometimes make a double batch. Just adding a little bit of water loosens it up and helps steam it. If you've added too much water, you just kind of boil it out till it's glossy again. I like that word too. It's like you want it to be saucy and glossy, but not dry.
Exactly. I think when you add the water to it, prevents the spices from getting too burnt and too cakey. Add the tomato paste, then I add the spices. I toast them just for a minute to help them bloom in that fat, and then I add the water to have it sort of simmer and reduce. Well, Carrie, what was your best bite of the
Well,
week?
Sonia, you'll be not surprised to find out that my best bite was also inspired by you, and it was also with ground meat. So I had some ground chicken. It was frozen in my freezer and I thawed it out. We've been talking about burgers, and so I ended up making this chicken burger and I added coriander, I added a little bit of cumin, I added some fresh herbs to it, but there was kind of a lot of it left over, and I was like, I don't know. I don't want burgers again. I just am not into that. And then I remembered that recipe you talked about called arrayas, which is basically a ground meat patty that you stuff into a pita and you toast it like you would a quesadilla. And so there was a night last week when James was out of town and it was just my son and I just took a little bit of that ground meat. I stuffed it into pitas. I let it toast. I did add a little bit of olive oil to the outside of the pita to toast it. And my son was like, wait, what is this? This is so good. And it was really just a remix of a dinner I just made 2 nights ago.
Well, it's so fun in the pita, and that's the traditional way of doing it. But I love that you used ground chicken, because typically I've done it with ground lamb or with ground beef. But ground chicken or ground turkey would absolutely work for this, because it's all about the technique. It's not about whatever filling. I think even impossible meat would work for this
Oh,
if you were
yeah,
vegan.
right.
And did you toast also the center part? So what you do is you toast each side, like the
Oh, and
both
I
sides of the
did. I
pita, but
did toast the center part too.
yeah,
I got it a little bit crispy because,
because it gets a little bit charred, a
yeah.
little bit caramelized, and that's like kind of the best part. And you could dip it in some tahini. You
I
could
mean,
have a
for sure,
sauce.
Mac dipped his in ketchup, and I swiped mine through the ketchup, and I really didn't mind that either. But
Sounds good.
I just thought it's such a genius and easy. I did look at all the recipes that you had posted, and I was like, well, people really do this with beef, and they really do it with lamb, and I'm just gonna give this a try. And it really
And it
and
works.
it really works. It's really more about the flavors that you put into it. That's what you're gonna get out of it, and the fun shape. It's basically a quesadilla filled with meat and no cheese, which I also loved that it didn't have any cheese in it.
Yeah, it's really good all on its own. Well, funny you should mention looking up recipes, because we got a great question on our hotline. Let's listen to it now.
Hi, Kari and Sonya. My name's Logan. I live in Alexandria, Virginia, and I am obsessed with your podcast. I tell everyone about it. And when I'm talking with my food friends, I feel like one of the things that comes up a lot is have recently adopted a spreadsheet system, but every time you guys talk about a recipe, I want to like save it and reference it for later. And a lot of my food friends are struggling with paper binders or recipes in cookbooks or millions of tabs open in a browser. Even just remembering where you put a recipe or where you saw it in a cookbook, I think can be challenging. So I'm curious how you all sort of organize the recipes from your personal chef days or that you find online and want to try or that you plan on talking about. Thank you so much.
Logan, I love this question. It's such an important one. And actually, we had a listener ask us about this recently in email too. So we'll get to that in a sec. But Kari, don't you love this question?
I love this question because I've struggled with this my entire life. I've saved recipes my entire life, and I feel both excited about them and saddled by them of like, how do you organize them and how do you find them when you need them?
I don't think there's a one size fits all answer. I really think this is sort of in the category of what works for you. And that's going to be different for every person. I have a digital storage method and then I have an analog storage method that I've used for years. So since I was a personal chef, I have a recipe journal. And now I'm on like my fifth or sixth journal of recipes in my life. So it really is like a journal. It could be a moleskin. Sometimes I've used sketchbooks, whatever works for you. And even if I'm copying a recipe from the internet or from a cookbook, if I'm making it, I put it in my journal. And then I can kind of have notes and it's out on my counter.
By journal, you mean you handwrite all your recipes.
I handwrite all my recipes.
What a treasure.
I mean, it's a little silly. It's certainly inefficient. It's not the best way because then you have to also write a table of contents so you know where everything is. And I have to remember, like, in what year did I make matzo ball pho? Oh, yes, it was in that journal. I mean, I kind of know where everything is, weirdly. I remember because for me, once I write it down, I kind of have a visual memory of it. And I just love having these collections of my years and looking back and be like, oh yeah, in that era, I was really into Japanese recipes. Then I had this whole Korean kick. I had a whole pie phase,
it's like
whatever
a trip
it
down
was.
memory lane, for sure.
It is. So that's my analog version, which I think works for almost no one. So it may not work for you. And then I have two other main strategies. One is Google spreadsheets and my Google Drive, because especially if I've written my own recipe, even if I have it in my journal, I also put it in my Google Drive so that at any time I can Google within my Drive that recipe. And that works better for me than having just one long document. But I've been hearing about different ways of organization that really work for people. We had a wonderful listener reach out to us. His name is Roy Lambert. He's local in Portland. And in his first email to us, which was just lovely and kind, he also mentioned that he was wondering about this question and that he has a software program called Paprika. And I looked it up and it was kind of a really interesting software program that you can use on your iPhone, on an Android, on Windows, on Mac. And it basically helps you organize your recipes and creates grocery lists and monthly meal plans. This is not sponsored. I know nothing, like I know nothing about this company. And then the very last thing I just have to mention is I also save things in my New York Times cooking app. I like to pay for the New York Times cooking app. I think it's a great value, that yearly annual fee, because the recipes are so trustworthy and good. And then anytime I like a recipe, I save it to my recipe box on there. I don't feel like I'm great at answering this question because this is clearly like not a unified system.
Well, I just don't think there's one correct way to do this. And I think that I'll just say for me, my systems have changed over time too. And just the way you described your journals, one, I think that's so beautiful. And like, I would want to own those journals. I would want your handwritten recipes because that was something I inherited from my grandmother. I have 3 recipe boxes of her handwritten recipes.
Wow.
And there, I know if I'm looking for her recipes, I can look in one of those 3 boxes. And then one thing that I have always done since high school is ripped pages out of magazines, like recipes out of magazines. And I am so weighed down by the amount of recipes that I have. One thing that I realized after I was a personal chef for a long time is I actually like to cook by ingredient. So I often start with, oh, I want to make something with broccoli tonight because that's what I have in my fridge. Or I want to make something with corn because it's in season. And so I actually have a lot of folders that are just for those things. I have a corn folder. I have a cherries folder. I have a strawberries folder. I have a summer food folder. I have a soups and stews folder. And so when I'm thinking about those things, I can at least go to those places. But one of the other things I do too, I don't use my Google Drive, I use my Notes app in my iPhone. And I have started when I'm doing my soup recipes now or our salad recipes, I put them in my phone because my phone is kind of always with me. And then I know I can find them. I guess I could do that in my Google Drive too.
For me, the Notes app is where I keep a running list of recipes I want to try or recipe ideas I have for development. I have like just a recipes list, but I love the idea of keeping the actual recipes in your notes.
Yeah, and I think you have always been more organized in this space than I am, which is why you have published a cookbook. And I will say, I recently made my granola for a friend of mine, and I had no idea where the recipe was. So I used your cookbook, which was such a reminder of what an honor it was for you to share that recipe in your cookbook. And also reminded me of that's something I really need to do is write a cookbook. But that's why this question is kind of unanswerable. It's like, what works for you? And also kind of what works for you in the stage that you're in.
I think it's also a question of knowing your style.
Yeah.
If you're a tactile person or a very visual person, then I find that electronic systems are not as good. For instance, my grandmother, she didn't really have recipe card books, but she saved all of her clippings and Xeroxes in these folders that I inherited. And then I put them all in a binder so that I can kind of flip through them and see. And she had little notes on some, and there are some of her handwritten recipes, but not that many. I wish there were more, you know. But I think that there's something about the system of keeping physical things, whether you're handwriting them or just printing them or clipping them from magazines. Because I also, in one of my many things, I also have a binder full of clipped recipes that I've collected over the years, and especially from back in the day before everything was available online. And so I think it really is, what kind of learner are you? If you're super digital, having a software program like Paprika, I know there used to be one called Comey. I think they might have gone out of business though. There are a couple you can just Google recipe software programs. They're really wonderful because then you can search by ingredient. Then you can create these automatic shopping lists. And the last thing I'll add is one of the reasons we started our Substack, and we link to that in the show notes, is because it was hard for us to find our own recipes sometimes. And we're still thinking about how can we share our recipes with all of you better. I think one of our long-term goals is to develop some kind of recipe index that we can all access online. But that just takes a little time and investment and some programming, frankly. But in the meantime, our solution is we share the recipes from our episodes on our Wednesday Substack so that we can search our inbox or search our Substack for whatever the topic is. Sometimes you can even search by specific recipe and it will come up in your email inbox. So you have to make sure you're subscribed to get the emails in your inbox.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely something that I've been using. You and I are the ones having these conversations, and I sometimes can't remember, out of the almost 200 episodes that we've published, which one had this recipe. I search in my inbox for all of those Substacks too.
Yeah, so I hope this helps. Again, maybe we will find some perfect solution that we can share with you all. For now, it's kind of like what works for you and embrace it.
Yeah, and thank you so much for asking the question. I think that even just hearing each other talk about it, like I learned that you have these journals with your handwritten recipes, Sonya. I want those someday, or copies of those.
Well, I love thinking about using my notes app more because it's true. It's a great way to organize things. And Logan, thank you also for your kind words about the pod. We just really love hearing from all of you. So thank you so much for taking the time to call in, to ask a question. And our hotline number is also in our show notes.
Yeah, until next time.
Bye.
Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.